You'd never believe a routine afternoon at the zoo could flip a wealthy widower's world upside down. But that's exactly what happened when his blind daughter asked a simple question. She squeezed his hand tighter as they passed the penguin exhibit. Her voice was soft, tinted with curiosity and confusion. "Daddy, why is that lady yelling at the nanny?" The sight in front of them, a middle-aged woman dripping in fine jewelry and entitlement, shouting at a young black nanny, was jarring. She spat words that sounded rehearsed, laced with old money disdain. "I don't pay a fortune for my granddaughter to mix with people like you. You have your own places to go, don't you?" 35-year-old Thomas Harrison, still grieving his wife who died in a car crash that also took Emma's sight, felt his stomach twist. He'd learned the world could be cruel. But seeing prejudice play out in front of his daughter, just 8, and already navigating darkness both literal and emotional, was unbearable. The nanny, calm and unreadable, replied politely, "Ma'am, I'm just taking care of Lily, as I always do. We're not hurting anyone." The grandmother laughed, dismissively and cruelly. "Your presence here is a nuisance. People like you should stay where you belong." Emma reached up gently and tugged on her father's shirt. "You're being mean to the pretty lady," she whispered. "I can sense she's sad." Since losing her sight, Emma had developed an uncanny ability, an emotional radar that let her feel what others only pretended to hide. In that moment, even without sight, she understood injustice. The nanny remained poised. There was no flinch, no surprise, just a quiet, unwavering confidence. Thomas's curiosity piqued. Without warning, Lily broke from the nanny's grasp and darted toward the penguin enclosure. Panic struck the nanny's face. "Lily, no!" Thomas thought he'd seen it all, until the nanny launched into action. In a fluid, graceful motion, she intercepted the child just as she stumbled at the edge of the enclosure. The nanny slipped on the wet ground. Mud splattered across her uniform. Silence fell. The crowd watched, holding its collective breath. The grandmother sneered, irritated more than relieved. "Now look what you've done," she hissed. "You can't even keep a child safe without causing a scene." The nanny looked up, locking eyes with her accuser, and for a moment, time slowed. Her smile wasn't ashamed, it was composed, knowing. "You're right, ma'am," she said softly, voice unwavering. "People like me do have a place in society." Thomas's heart skipped. Something had shifted. This wasn't a meek apology. This was a declaration. The moment hummed with untold depth. On their ride home, Emma nodded at her father, saying quietly, there was something special about her tone. She wasn't blind to nuance. She was just blind. Thomas felt stirred. There was a story under that careful exterior. That night, he couldn't sleep. During dinner, Emma watched him, her fork still in midair. "You're thinking about the lady at the zoo, aren't you?" he asked. She nodded. She wasn't like others I've heard. There was something in the way she held herself, like she was smarter than anyone guessed. His chest tightened. She understood him better than most. Later, pushing aside sleeplessness, he went online and hunted down any mention of Ashworth schools, private institutions linked to the entitled grandmother. Their reputation was rigid, elite, exclusionary. It didn't explain everything, but it did explain her arrogance. The next afternoon, in a boardroom filled with investors, momentum paused when his assistant knocked. "A woman outside has a proposal related to inclusive education." "Send her in," Thomas said, before realizing the weight of what he was asking for. Months ago, he'd quietly started developing inclusive educational tools, technology to transform learning for children with disabilities. It was personal and public. Not yet. Still, he wanted to see whoever was bold enough to bring this up mid-meeting. When Jasmine walked in, wearing a crisp blazer and carrying a leather briefcase, it took everything in him not to stare. She introduced herself, Jasmine Carter. With a calm, professional authority, she explained she held a PhD in special education from Harvard and had been following his private work. He leaned in. How did she know about Emma? I make a point of learning who I'm working with, she said gently, as if words could be velvet and steel at once. And because she worked for the Ashworths. She stepped forward, opening a dossier of documents, emails, recordings, contracts, proof of systemic prejudice embedded in Ashworth schools. Thomas's mind reeled. This wasn't whistleblowing from outside. She had been inside. She had gathered the evidence himself. He barely remembered to breathe until she offered a proposal. Combine his emerging inclusive education initiative with her insider information to create real change. Investors leaned forward, turning curiosity into captivated interest. That evening, his phone buzzed. Detective Rodriguez, Chicago Civil Rights Department. They received an anonymous tip about Ashworth schools. Would he interview? Jasmine smiled quietly behind his shoulder. The machinery was in motion. Marcus Williams, a civil rights attorney, and Jasmine's Harvard classmate flew in. Examining the evidence, he declared it pure dynamite, not just a few hurtful words, but a long-standing pattern. Emma, playing quietly in the corner, seemed to sense. "Daddy, why do people act like that?" she asked softly. He knelt next to her. "Because some people don't see others, like you or Jasmine, as equal, but we're going to help make them see." Weeks later, the plan fell into place. On Monday afternoon, the Ashworth School Board would be in a meeting to review admissions. Simultaneously, federal agents would enter, investigators would flood in, journalists waiting. Warrant in hand, they'd expose decades of deception in one coordinated strike. On that morning, Victoria Ashworth ate her garden breakfast comfortably secure in her power. She sent instructions to Jasmine to prepare Lily's uniform and keep her isolated from unacceptable peers. Jasmine smiled and replied quietly, "Of course, Mrs. Ashworth," though now she was anything but compliant. At precisely 2 p.m. in the marble boardroom, Victoria addressed the assembled board calmly about tradition and standards. Detective Rodriguez then made his entrance. The meeting froze. He revealed warrants. The recordings began. The grandmother's dismissive, racist words echoed in the hall. Victoria's face crumbled. She protested it was taken out of context. It wasn't. Evidence mounted. Insults, admissions, scenes of calculated exclusion, captured via tapes and cameras Jasmine had discreetly placed over months. At that moment, Jasmine entered. No longer the invisible nanny, she stood regal, educated, powerful, flanked by Thomas and Marcus. "You underestimated me," she said gently, overwhelmingly. "You only saw a black woman in need of work, but you blinded yourself to who I really was." The room tilted. Board members shrank. Journalists stormed in. Federal investigators sealed off files. 30 years of Ashworth reverence shattered in minutes. 6 months later, headlines spoke for what legal filings could not. Ashworth School CEO sentenced for systemic discrimination. Assets seized. Compensation fund in place. Support for families once excluded. Jasmine had become a national symbol. Her book on infiltration and reform was in university programs. Her TED Talk on institutional change was trending worldwide. Emma, now 9, bounded into Thomas's office. "Daddy, 3 more families enrolled today. Kids like me and others learning together. Jasmine's vision was taking off. They'd opened multiple inclusive campuses backed by investors from San Francisco who believed in the mission. Later, Detective Rodriguez called with Victoria's appeal news. Rejected. She'd serve her sentence. And more families emerged, emboldened by Jasmine's courage. In the garden, where he used to lunch with Emma, he sat silent as she joined him. She asked, "Daddy, do you still think of that lady at the zoo?" Thomas looked at her, gratitude softening every line. "Sometimes," he said, voice gentle, but not with anger, with thanks, because she reminded us why this fight is worth having. Emma smiled knowingly. "You know what Jasmine says? The best revenge isn't breakage. It's building something so beautiful they can't touch it." Thomas clasped her to his side and glanced toward the playground, where children of all abilities laughed together in harmony, proof that true excellence embraces everyone. The cruelty of yesterday had sparked the brilliance of tomorrow.